Let's call this to order. We got our working session for January 13th, 2021. We'll just get going. I believe we have unanimous consent to bring our public. I don't think we have any presentation items, so we're going to go to our public comment portion. We're going to move from the end of the agenda to the beginning. So I have two public speaker request forms. Kevin Kwasny and Rita Dupree. Ladies before gentlemen. Ms. Dupree, please. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Like you said, my name is Rita Dupree, and I'm here twofold. One as a landlord in Rapid City, and the other as a volunteer for St. Vincent de Paul. It's a nonprofit that I volunteer for, work for. So I also would like to use some of my time. I have a text from my husband, Ralph Dupree, who's co-owner with me in our properties, and then my brother, Mike. This is from Ralph Dupree. Both of them had other things going on today. So this is from Ralph in reference to landlords paying water bills. There are a lot of people complaining about the costs of rent in Rapid City. This cost asked to landlords will be passed on to the renters, thus increasing the already high cost of rent, making affordable housing even harder to find. Number two, this will make it harder for people to establish credit for themselves. Number three, the amount of water waste will increase tremendously because of the lack of responsibility. The second comment is from Mike. A couple of points. We as landlords are not able to stop any utilities, but it sounds as if you are as a provider. What happened to water conservation? You have to know that not being responsible for the usage will only allow people to not conserve and not care, driving up usage and costs to landlords. Which then brings me to my last point. What happened to the whole city concept of affordable housing? This will be another factor in rental prices. Sincerely, Mike Kwasny, landlord, restaurant, manager, planning and zoning, concerned citizen, and last but not least, registered voter who votes in every election. P.S. Would have been at this meeting, but have other meetings that would not allow my presence. I totally concur with what Mike and Ralph have both been saying. Our taxes have gone up, which all of our taxes have gone up this year. Our insurance has gone up exorbitantly. We have 3 rentals in Rapid City, and we try to budget those rentals to still give affordable housing, and yet we can't dip into our own savings either. The problem with consumption, I worked as a civil servant for 30 years out at the military family housing at Ellsworth, and it's a known fact that people who have their utilities paid for are not necessarily good about conservation. For example, they'll turn their heat up, and I know this isn't water, but they'll turn their heat up to 80 and open their front doors and open all the windows because they're hot. So that's a concern. Their water bills may go from $50 to $200, and that cost will go to the landlord, who's already on a tight budget. I wasn't totally aware of all the litigation and the processes of you guys speaking until I saw it on the news, and then I reached out and got some more information. So I'm sorry I wasn't here before. I came knowing what was going on. The second reason that I'm here is I'm a St. Vincent de Paul volunteer, and our funds, we're a nonprofit organization, and our funds come from parishioners at the Cathedral, St. Therese, and Blessed Sacrament right now. And people give from their heart, and we get at least 50 to 100 calls a month for people calling in because their water's been shut off or they're behind. We try to help those who are in the most need. For example, people with disabilities, people who are have small children in their home, have no water. They've had no water for 2 weeks. They have medical apparatuses that need water. So when we call to pay their bill, Oftentimes, 50% of that is just fees going to the city. So if those fees, there's no way we can get that fee deferred with the way it is right now. If we as a nonprofit could go ahead and get payment applied to bring the people back to zero, then we'd have more funds to pay other people bringing their water back on. So twofold, if we could get the fees looked at, especially for nonprofits helping people out, people in need, people who've been out of work because of COVID. You know, all the stimulus bills that are, people who are supposed to get all these stimulus checks. You guys, we get 30 calls a day for people in Rapid City needing help with rent, water, utilities. It's real, it's valid. We're taking food out to people, putting it on their steps. So I am not in support of these fees being pushed to landlords, because we'll get more calls for higher rents, and I just think it's going to keep rolling. So thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Rita,
Ms. Dupree.
could I ask a question before you
Yes.
go, please?
Yes.
Thanks for your work with the church and trying to help out that way. We appreciate
you.
that. Is there a way, and maybe other council members or even the billing people can educate me, is there a reason why the water bill is not tied to a deposit so that that deposit is not relinquished until all the utility bills are paid up? Is there something, an ordinance against doing that or something? I'm just curious if you know the answer to that, or anybody does.
I don't know.
Mr. Evans, I can respond a little bit, obviously. Typically, when you go get a water hookup, you pay a deposit. And so I'm not sure somehow this came about, and I don't think any of us here even understand that we passed this at some point. Obviously, we're going to maybe revisit it and have a longer conversation about it, because there are a lot of ramifications that we haven't taken into account. And one of them is that when you see say there's $600,000 worth of water bills that aren't collectible or whatever, you have to put that in the context of why they're not collectible, how they're not collectible, all those types of things. And I don't think we spent the time to do that. And you are raising a good question right now: is what's happening to these deposits? Ms. Kwasny, I can see her brother-in-law here, myself. There's a lot of, and maybe some more of you up here that rent properties understand that this has a lot of ramifications, and there's that we haven't really vetted. And so I'm thinking that, I don't know how we do this, but we probably need to put this on an agenda to revisit this item and actually vet it, because I already see you have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. What happens to that deposit? I've looked back on some of the old water bills, and they were big companies that had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of bills, and if someone had just called those people, they would have paid them. So I'm not exactly sure where we're at with that. But also, uncollectible accounts is a matter of fact of doing businesses. Typically, that is factored into, say, if you're a Walmart business, and they know they're going to have X amount of theft from there. But that doesn't mean they charge everybody extra when they come in. Well, they do eventually, and that's kind of the way the water bill works. That number's factored into that too. So that's always an obvious discussion part of that we need to have too. Is that factored in there? Obviously it is with the water rates. I'm assuming when they did the studies, they knew that there would be so many uncollectible accounts. So all of a sudden now to say, oh, we got $600,000 worth of uncollectible accounts, we need to hold the landlords responsible, maybe some sort of a reaction that should have been vetted farther. So I don't hope that answers the question a little bit. I'm willing to vet it a little bit farther. There are deposits. I even make a deposit, even though I've been a water bill person. I've been late on some because I have so many of them. I probably got a stack about that thick that I pay because of the way the properties are aligned, but typically never not paid one. So, and I still pay deposits. So yeah, there's deposits that are made on them.
Thank you, Mr. Weifenbach.
Well, that sort of answers my question, but I still am curious, because I know that if the walls are bashed in and there's, windows broken, that deposit is not going to be returned. And I can't see why the business model could not be adjusted so that it's not the city's responsibility to pay that portion of the business expense. So, I mean, that's my question. So I think we do need to investigate this. Thank you.
Ms. Drew?
I've had a lot of concerns on this too from landlords and people connecting with me on this. I think it was rushed through. I think it's something that we do have to go back and pick apart a little bit. I'm sorry the finance department has probably made some plans to go through with this already, but I don't feel that this was a fair discussion that we had. So I would like to really revisit it. Councilman Nordstrom and I have had some discussions on bringing this back so that we can rehash it, maybe come up with a way to have the landlords pay the last month's rent and make sure that that's somehow guarded that way, that they don't have to pay every month's rent, you know, or the deposit or whatever you guys are talking about. But there's a better solution here. And I see that Pauline has come up to the lectern, so Pauline.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear, this is not a finance office policy.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with the finance office. We collect the water bill payments. That's what we do. As far as deposits are concerned, they're applied to the last bill. So when somebody moves out of a property, whether it was previously a renter and they move out and close the account, we apply their deposit to their last bill, and if there's anything left over, we send them the money back. That's how the deposit works for the utilities.
So
Oh, I think, well, let me respond to that. I think there was a little confusion about my question.
It was
I wasn't
I
necessarily.
was recognized, Bill, so
Okay.
could you give me a second? So whose is this? Whose item?
This falls under Public Works, and I believe there was an ordinance that came forward for two readings in which this was highlighted as part of the presentation at Public Works Department, because I got brought into it when the
Yes.
complaints started coming in, and so I started asking questions, but it was part of an ordinance, it was part of a presentation that Dan Kuhn did at a Public Works meeting. I'll let Dale finish.
Okay.
First of all, I think it's a great idea to bring this back to talk about some more. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there regarding this item. I think there are a lot more options for landlord tenants than the very basic way we've been talking about it today. So we'd be happy to put this on an upcoming agenda, have in-depth discussion about it, what it means, what options are for both landlords, tenants, and give it a bit more discussion. Dan Kuhn, the Assistant Public Works Director, gave a presentation to the Public Works Committee and mentioned this in detail at that meeting. This was in our transition period from Public Works to working sessions. We came back to the working session and asked if another presentation would be necessary, and the committee said no. So anyway, just a little background on it, but certainly we'd be happy to come back and talk about this in detail with this group.
Can we not enforce this until we've had time to look at it again, Dale?
I don't have any choice because the ordinance has been passed. So
Okay.
I've got to follow the law of the land.
Okay, okay. Well, in retrospect, you know, I think it was a really tough time for us. You know, we were going through the mask mandate and having 2 hours of discussion before we got to the meeting. Holidays were coming up. It was just a time, I think it just slipped off our plates. And I'm sorry that we didn't get the presentation again. We probably should have gone for that. Maybe in the future, you can help us understand when something important should be seen and say to us, hey, you got to pay attention to this because you're going to hear about it.
That's precisely what we did.
Okay, well, you know what that time was like, Dale, and we're still going through it. So just, you know, maybe a little bit of information to us to say, we're going to do this for you because you need to know what it is. So, okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions?
Well, at this point, I think what we should do is just put this on the schedule for the next working session. I know we do have some people in the queue. We can get further and further and further down into the weeds, but I think if we put it on the agenda for the next working session, we can just do that. And then we also do have another gentleman here that would like to speak as part of public comment. So if you don't mind, we'll just go to Mr. Kevin Kwasny. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Kwasny, as you have just said. I want to thank you, first of all, for the work you guys do. You know, I don't get involved with this kind of stuff very often. I've been a citizen of Rapid City since the day I was born, and this is the first time I've ever come to one of these meetings to say something. I've been here before just to listen. I agree. You guys seem to have a pretty good understanding of what's going on here and what happened. Just a few points I'd like to make here. You know, this kind of sets a precedence going down the road, these kind of fees. Okay, as a landlord, if the fire department is called to a house for an emergency, is the landlord going to be held responsible? I don't think they should. It's a personal item. Just like the water is a consumable item like groceries. If the person in a house can't provide their groceries, this is far-fetched, but is that landlord responsible to make sure that those people have food in their house? This is a consumable item, water. Everybody needs it. Every household desires it, and by law, I think that you guys have to provide it. Now, who pays for it? That's all questionable, but it is a consumable. I cannot go in there and say, oh, you've used too much damn water, shut it off. Excuse the language. I am kind of passionate about this. I've had several fees and stuff changed on me over the years, as all of you have. And sometimes you just swallow them. Sometimes you got to say something about them. And I just see this a wormhole where you're going to start passing more and more down to people. You know, are you going to go to the garbage cans as a city and say, oh, the landlord has to take responsibility because they threw away a hazardous waste item? You know, am I going to have to start checking the garbage cans every time I go out the door? You know, it's a hole that you're going down that I don't think none of us can manage. And I know several of you do have rentals here. I know you personally. And it's a rabbit hole we don't want to go down, passing off responsibilities. As Ron said, every business has a business model. Part of that model is taking on unclaimable fees, damages that are caused. Somewhere in the city's plan, they've got to have a responsibility. A renter is not a second-class citizen. A renter is a citizen. The governor put him as a second-class citizen when he put a discount to homeowners of 30% on their property taxes, but landlords have to pay that additional amount. That's a tax on renters. And this is the same type of thing. We're going down a rabbit hole here. Don't do it, please. I'm asking you. Okay. I go and rent a shelter down at the park. Okay, I'm renting that shelter from the park. Does that make the city responsible for what the people that are in that shelter do? Kind of the same thing. Points to be taken when you're going through this. Okay, I'm pretty fired up, but also, I don't know if anybody looked into housing laws. There's fair housing. I can't be prejudiced against anybody. But somewhere in this sounds like there's a prejudice. Not going there hardcore, but somewhere in this sounds like a prejudice. We know a certain person's probably not going to pay their water bill, so we'll make it somebody else's responsible. So we're being prejudiced towards that person. Consider that also, please. I think I said enough. It was quick. It was to the point. I think listening to all of you guys, you understand. I'd just like you to consider these points as you debate this. And please don't go there. Please don't go there. As a citizen of Rapid City, for all my life, please do not go there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kwasny, and thank you, Ms. Dupree, as well. We'll move this to the next working session, which I believe is January 27th, and I believe we are all receptive to revisiting this. So thank you. All right, we will move along. Public comment is now closed if there's no one else. Seeing none, we'll just move forward. Parks and Recreation, Director Biegler.
Good afternoon. This item is a standard request for authorization to purchase 2 pickups, full-size pickups for the Parks Maintenance Division. The quote that we got was from Liberty Superstores here in Rapid City, and it is matching the state bid pricing for these pickups. The funding for this purchase is in the Parks and Recreation Operations budget, so it is funded. Any questions?
Great. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving right along. Chief Culberson, number 2.
Good afternoon and thank you. This is a request to follow our large vehicle purchase out of CIP, continuing down that path. Engine 6 is due to be replaced. We're replacing that with a ladder truck for various reasons, to include growth to the south side, southwest, and large apartment complexes up there. So it's asking for approval to continue with that purchase. It's all funded out of CIP.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just one quick question. We know that like items like these pickups for the Parks Department, they go through the state bid and have to meet all that. Do large items like this meet that criteria, or do you just go out for bids for those?
So we can go out for bids for those. This is utilizing Sourcewell, which is a national purchasing group who do use bidding and follow the bidding laws, so we have it all approved through the Attorney's Office and Finance Director. Yeah, yes, we can order the vehicle exactly the way we want to, following those laws, yeah.
Mr. Stroman?
Thank you, Chief. Is there any salvage or trade-in value from Engine 6 that you're able to capture?
Yeah, and we do that. We're keeping that truck this time and putting it in our fleet of our backups.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Moving along. Thank you. Director Sumption, numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Number 3 is standard for our volunteers to be covered by workers' compensation insurance. 4, this is something that we do every January. It's for the prior year bills that didn't get paid at the last meeting that came in after the deadline, so that way the budget comes forward to 2021. 5, I think there's 2 cleanup assessments on there for various reasons, and 6, I believe it's the Parks Department that's surplusing some items.
Thank you. Great. Director Tech, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Good afternoon again. Items 7 through 12, I believe, are all on consent. Item 7, annually, Pennington County comes up with a list of properties that people have not paid taxes on. So the majority of these properties are drainage type areas, so the city will obtain those properties and will maintain them into the future. They do provide public drainage. I believe there was one parcel that was just adjacent to a right-of-way that was an unbuildable, too small to even put a structure on. We'll acquire that property and it'll more or less become part of a public right-of-way. So I believe that was the first one on there. So that's what item 7 is all about. Item 8 is part of our standard pavement rehab annual projects out in the Deadwood Avenue area along Rand Road. Item 9 is a major project out at our water reclamation facility that was identified approximately back in 2016 as part of our facilities plan that we'll need to upgrade. So without going into great detail, it's just mechanical things wear out and it's time to replace some major components out at water reclamation facility. Item 10 is an annual contract with AET for environmental testing out at the solid waste facility. This has been a multi-year contract. We third party require hire somebody to do that testing, so we're in compliance with our permit. Item 11, purchasing another sweeper. I know that was featured in the news lately. One thing I'd like to mention about Rapid City and our sweeping program, we are one of the only cities in the United States that sweeps year-round. I had the pleasure of attending a conference a number of years ago made up of people, public works folks from all over the country. One of the items we talked about was sweeping, and quite honestly, Rapid City, we're the only ones that do it year-round. Sioux Falls, for instance, they go out and sweep one time in the spring after winter. That's all the sweeping they do. We're out there sweeping all the time, especially at night, even in the wintertime if it's above freezing. So that's a great quality of life thing. We have a good sweeper fleet, so this is just an opportunity for us to keep our equipment good and keep those streets clean and keep our waterways clean too. And then item 12 is a sidewalk variance. This is located out on Nemo Road, so it's in the 3-mile jurisdiction. It is all rural. There are no sidewalks anywhere near there. We do recommend approval of this sidewalk variance. Any questions on those items?
You want to ask them now? Okay. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tech. Moving on to Community Development, Director Young, 13 through 17, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Darla. Excuse me, Darla
No,
Drew had a question.
this is for him
Okay,
and
thank
Michelle.
you. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to turn the time over on the first 3 items to Michelle Schulke, our CDBG manager. She can make presentation and answer any questions you have on that. Item 16, I'll invite Kelly Brennan from Long Range Planning to come up and make presentation on that. And item 17, I'll invite Kip Harrington, Long Range Planner, to address that one.
Ms. Schulke, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Number 13 is preliminary recommendations from the Investment Committee to award funds from the Cdbg Cb3. This is the second tranche of money we received through the CARES Act. Number 14 is authorization to sign the contract for the Cdbg Cb agreement. That's the first tranche of CARES Act money that we'll be receiving for a purpose of responding to the coronavirus pandemic. And number 15 is authorization to amend the SF 424. This is the contract for the entitlement money for FY20. We did receive notification from HUD that our grant agreement will be reduced by $79, and this is just a paperwork mechanism to keep track of that change. If the members have any questions on number 13, one of our awarded recipients is the YMCA, and Roger with the YMCA is here for availability. Thank you.
I have questions, Michelle, on the entire, I'm not going to ask anything for Roger right now. Am I recognized? Can I talk? Okay. When I look at this list, I know it's a necessary and good list of nonprofits here, but it kind of concerns me that it's Black Hills Works and Wellspring and YMCA and Youth and Family Service. It's the usual suspects, and I think that we have a lot of other needs on the community right now that aren't being recognized. I know you've done your work already, so I'm not going to come in and try and throw this off track. But next year I'd like to be part of this because I'm just aware of other groups that need help. They just don't know the path. And so it almost seems like this is laid down and fairly easily for the people that already know this system. And you know, I'm a fundraiser. I know that YMCA has very effective fundraising mechanism. Wellfleet has the same thing. Meals on Wheels, same with Black Hills Works. So it just concerns me a little bit that these seem to be the same people year after year, and I'd just like to maybe next year work with you, and you could give me a call when you're starting this process, because I just know of other younger businesses and nonprofits that serve a different demographic, maybe even more indigenous people that we could be working with. I'd like to see a little bit more of this money actually go into that rent thing under Pennington County Health and Human Services. But, you know, it's kind of set. So I'm not gonna upset the apple cart. I just have some concerns that I would really like to see that go to the biggest need, which I think is the mortgage and utility and assistance program. Now with the YMCA, is that the thing that's going into One Heart? Is that to fund that particular?
Yes, it is. It's part of the One Heart program.
Okay, then no problem with that. okay? Because I really, really love the One Heart project. But, I mean, for the rest of these, you get my point. They do have fundraising staff, and I'm not sure if this is the best use of our money in this way. So, next year, okay?
I would appreciate that conversation, and we are always looking for parties who have not applied in the past.
Yeah.
That would certainly be welcomed.
And they say, we don't know how to do this. We've never even heard about it. So that's what I'd like to do. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Drew. Mr. Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More or less a comment for Michelle Schulke is that, and perhaps more inclusive of the rest of the City Council, I just had a little bit of an update on the CARES Act that the city has received, and I'm looking to the CDBG group. You've got something like an advisory group that gets together and figures out where this money goes to and who gets that. Am I correct on that?
That's correct, the Community Investment Committee.
Thank you. What I'm looking at here is using a similar model like what you folks do with the rest of the CARES Act funding that we've got. Now, I'm probably getting way ahead of everything, but there's a lot of internal working mechanisms that need to take place first. And if there is any money left over, I'd like to see us, meaning the city council members, if there is any money left over, using the CDBG model as a process for taking a look if there is any CARES Act funding left over, because I think you've got a very good program. I've also tried to do what I can to help out the CDBG getting that information out to the public as well. So there's several things that are going on here all at once, and that has to do with what do we do with the CARES Act funding? Let's deal with that internally with the city and the departments of it. If there's any left over, then using the CDBG model and I would be even advocating that if there is any funding left over, that you folks get that money because you do it in a very intelligent way of dispersing that funding over there. So it's just something to take a look at, and I think it's a good program what you folks do over there. Thank you. I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom. Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, President Armstrong. Michelle, can you talk to us a little bit about the process that this group goes through so we understand the factors that are taken into consideration to ensure that it's distributed fairly?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. I think first I want to speak on the components and the folks that are on this committee. We strive to have a variety of voices from a variety of different sectors. Having other funders on this committee is also a key component. So we want to have folks that understand where other money might be coming from to support programs that we don't fund. How this process works is we process the applications to ensure that they're complete, and then we have the committee meeting go through each and every single application, ask questions, and we will follow up with the agencies who applied to get any additional answers from them. And from there, they make recommendations, and that's what we're seeing today is those recommendations then go to council.
And do we make sure that the members of this committee are not employees or board members of the organizations requesting funds?
There's a fairly stringent conflict of interest regulation with HUD, and there is a conflict of interest which has been disclosed, and we have gone through public comment period and had the attorney's office work on that. So if a conflict of interest arises, there's a pretty stringent process to avoid that intentionally or unintentionally.
Whenever we have these one-time funds, obviously, that can help a lot of entities, and I think we all just want to make sure it's done fairly. Not saying this isn't, but hearing some of the comments up here, I want to make sure, and for us, that we're not advocating for our favorite causes before we are ultimately deciding on these funds. So that's the other thing I think about is obviously we all have things that we care about that are on these lists. Looking at these organizations who are all wonderful and do great things. Do you know if the HUD requirements with the city council, for example, do we have requirements, like if we are an employee, or if we are, obviously if we're an employee, but if we're a board member or a part of those, I guess, nonprofits, is that something we need to be taking into consideration?
Yes, anyone who has a conflict of interest, who has a deciding factor on who does and who does not get funded, absolutely should be disclosed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Mr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Michelle, thank you and to your group for the process and all the work and time, because it's an amazing thing. I read the list, and just thank you for the work. Tremendous amount of work, so thank you to you and your group. In regards to item number 14, I'm curious about that. The other day when she happened to be in Pierre, Governor Noem said that there was a tremendous amount of CARES money and CARES Act left available. There were articles in the newspaper about how our legislators in Pierre are trying to find ways to spend it because there's so much money. And yet we sit here with water bills that need to be paid and quality of life issues that need to be paid. So I'm curious, in regards to item 14, you mentioned that that was CARES Act money as well. Can that be used for any of these down home, right here, quality of life type issues that our people are suffering from and we need to address?
Yes, thank you for the question. The state CARES Act money may or may not be tied with CDBG. And the state has allocated $9 million from the non-CDBG funds that can be used for rent assistance and can be used for assistance that goes directly to households. So what we're doing here with the Cdbg Cb is very complementary, but the state's funding has to be spent quicker. And so if we are doing complementary projects, for example, funding Pennington County Health and Human Services, they can tap into that state money, and when that runs out, then access the local CDBG money.
So how would we address our local issues of water bills and people paying rent and that kind of thing to get some of that money?
Yes, anyone who is not able to pay their water bill should reach out to 211. They already have a process set up through the state and through Pennington County Health and Human Services, but we always want folks to funnel through 211 first. Application is open and they can get those water bills paid if they're eligible.
So people who are in that spot, then hopefully we can make this clear for the newspaper and TV, that people call 211, and that is the first line that they need to do in order to get assistance to pay water, rent, anything that they're struggling with, correct? Make sure I understand that?
That's 100% correct.
Okay, so we really encourage people to do that. Sometimes people sit back and expect other people around them to take care of them. And some folks need to take the aggressive step to take care of themselves. So hopefully people who are struggling and in those roles can reach out and use 211 and get the process going. Can we as the city get any of that money to have to fill in the cup, in our water department, for example, or anything like that?
The city was awarded money from the state directly, and I'm not clear on what the priorities have been set for that pot of money. Okay. That's all that I can speak to on that side, but there is a possibility.
Okay. Well, thank you. It bothered me that the governor and certain legislators are talking about trying to find ways to spend this money because they have so much, and yet we have so much need right here. The fact that they were flaunting that money around I found to be rude and offensive. So it's great to hear that there's a way we can use it to meet the needs of our citizens here in Rapid City. Call 211, get the process going for you. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Director Tech?
Thank you. If
Chairman.
I could chime in, the 211 program, it started last year. We had a lot of our customers that we notified, the people that were delinquent in their bills. We sent notifications to them about this program, and there were a lot of people that did participate in it. But thanks for bringing that up again. That's always a great message to push out, that help is available, and 211 is the right way to do that.
Thank you very much. I know the process when the whole renter and landlord thing was brought forward. Those that did it believed it was vetted properly, and no fault to any of them. I'm glad that the council is willing to take another look at it. It means we're listening to our constituents, which is why we're here, and perhaps we can come up with something better. So thank you. Thank you, Michelle. I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Ms. Schulke, anything else? 13, 14, 15?
No, that is all, Madam Chair.
Great. Mr. Weifenbach is in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate to, I appreciate this conversation getting to this level, because this is where we need to go. And I appreciate what Alderman Drew was talking about with getting the involvement from the city on some of these things that just been done the same way all the time, forever and ever and ever. And we as a council are elected by the citizens in the community. We deal with our constituents on a daily basis. We deal with the forces that they have to work with. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but what we've done is we've diced out a lot of these responsibilities to these committees that report to nobody, not even us. And then when we do have a problem with that committee or that organization, just not a thing we can do. So I agree with Alderman Drew that we need to start looking at these things and seeing where the opportunities are. There is a huge, and I'm sure that the people that spoke here tonight that have rental properties in this town, there's a huge need. These guys don't got jobs. I mean, and we've survived a lot better than a lot of other of our communities in the area. We haven't had a huge decrease in tax revenue and those types of things because people have dug in. They've took the chances. You can see our curve changing downward. But we've kept our businesses open. But yet now we're getting all this money coming in, and we got to spend it. And there's water bills out there. There's people that have rent out there. I know that the county, and I guess one of my questions to you is, I know the county actively, proactively is out there giving money to tenants. And I've had, in the last few months, I've had several of my tenants get their rent paid for by the county through the South Dakota Housing Program. And I'm not sure how your $9 million that you mentioned here fits into that category. I understand that I've only been on the council here for a couple months. I was previously for a long time ago, but I see a lot of the same characteristics that haven't changed. But so how does your funds interact with what the county's doing, what the state's doing? And it seems like, honestly, we haven't, as a city, picked up the pace here and started showing these people there's an opportunity, and I guess that's where we need to be, because there is a lot of people in the community that have needs other than just the old standby nonprofits that have been there. And there are people out in the community that are just, they're not exactly poor, or they're not exactly below that poverty line, but they're struggling. They're taking 2 and 3 jobs, okay, because they have to survive because the rent's so high here, and we're seeing a huge influx of prices of houses and rents and what things cost, water, electric. I mean, water and electric are almost the same utility anymore when it comes to how much they spend. Water in a 2-room house is roughly at a minimum, I think, like $75 a month, which doesn't seem a lot to some of you that have good jobs, but to some of these people that are working in a restaurant business or a service-oriented business, those types of things are a lot of money. We spent a lot of time debating on whether people should wear masks or stuff. We spent little time offering assistance to these people that were working their tails off like a duck, you know, floating along. Look, they're floating along, and underneath the water, they're swimming. They're just this far away from just sinking. And if we have an opportunity with this $9 million, I don't know how it fits in, but I can tell you the county's proactively out there. They ran out of funds one time, and I think they got another level of funds. So if you do have people that you're looking at having to possibly evict, but you've worked with them in the past and they want to pay their bills and they're in between jobs or have had job fluctuations because of the market, get a hold of the county for sure. And I guess I would ask for your input on how the city, do we work with the county on that, or do we have a separate situation with the money or whatever? So,
You know, I appreciate the question. The state money, the $9 million that was discussed, less than 6 million statewide has been spent on direct assistance. So there's still about $3 million left. Pennington County Health and Human Services is just one agency, but they're the local agency that's implementing that and helping people with the application.
So clarify that for me. So the money that part of this 9 million goes to them to help disperse?
The 9 million is actually not through the city, it's through the state.
State gave.
Statewide.
Okay.
And it is not all for Pennington County Health and Human Services, it is statewide to help a variety of people. What our city CDBG CV money is for is to supplement that. Should that run out, our money can kick in the very next day. And that's the intention, is that's how the city is addressing this. So there are plenty of resources right now. If people call 211 or go to Pennington County Health and Human Services, as you mentioned, they can get their rent paid, they can have help with utility bills, they're even offering mortgage assistance. But one of the key factors with the city CDBG money is that it has to be COVID related. I'm sorry, the CDBG CV. It has to have a COVID impact tied to it, which I think is
Right now,
pretty real.
I mean, I've lived in Rapid City since 1970, and I've been a landlord for the last 20 years, and I've never seen it at this level where people are struggling so hard. And the people, I had a conversation with the young lady over there in the corner about people who can't pay and people who won't pay. And there's a distinct difference. And some of these people are people that just can't pay. And sometimes the restrictions based upon their incomes and stuff. I mean, we really got to look at the fact that it takes way more money than you think in Rapid City to survive once you pay your property tax on a two-bedroom house is like $200. Your water's $75. Your gas is $75. Your electric's $75. Your insurance is about, I'd say, close to $50, and you can see where that is. You're at $400, $500 before you add any debt service to a rental property. And then when you're talking somebody who's making $11 or $12 an hour, maybe $15 an hour, they're making it. But if they're switching jobs because of the economy, what's happening right now with COVID is a lot of people are switching jobs. So does that qualify somebody when they're just, everything costs more and everything's harder to get and everything just, people are switching jobs and their income may portray the fact that they last month they may have made money, now they're not. So
That's a really good point, and we're still constantly asking questions of HUD of how to address that, because when we ask, what do you expect your income to be in the next 12 months, a lot of people have no idea. Right. And we'll be as flexible as we possibly can.
I appreciate that. I would go back to Alderman Drews, if there's a way that the city can get more involved in a lot of these committees at this level, if we're going to take responsibility for them, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weifenbach. Mr. Roberts, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate this discussion. I really appreciate a lot of things that Ron's just brought. Sorry about that. 211, news to me. I think that we need to get out and do some PSAs on this. I've been involved with a couple of groups over the last 3 months that have been helping people with water bills and a few other things, and also I'm a landlord, so I've got a few people that are a little behind on rent that we've floated. And you know what? That's not a huge issue. I'm lucky to be in the position that I'm in. About 3 or 4 days before Christmas, I was talking to one of these groups that have been helping people with water bills and didn't know anything about it. And actually, they were out of money like most nonprofits this year. It's been very hard to raise money this year. And I paid this family's water bill that was a couple months behind. You know what? Because at Christmas, people shouldn't have to be worrying about things like that. And I wish that at that time I'd have known about 211. But I do think that we need to do some PSAs. We need to get that out in the public. People need to know. There's a lot of people out there that don't know that this help is available, including myself. And part of that's probably my own fault for not keeping up on things, I guess. But, That's being busy. We're all busy people on this board. I find that to be wonderful news, that there is help out there, more help than I thought there was available, and I can definitely let some groups know that. But again, sometimes government is not too good at communicating to its constituents, communicating to the people, and I think that should be part of our job. We should be open, we should let the people know what's going on, what's available to them. So I'm just hoping that there's some way we can get more of this information out to more people. That's, I guess, my main point I'm trying to make here. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Anything more on 13, 14, 15? If not, I'll speak with Kelly Brennan. You're up for number 16. Thank you, Ms. Schulke.
Good afternoon. This item is to authorize the mayor and finance director to sign the professional services agreement with Fugro for the digital GIS base map development services in an amount not to exceed $60,979.19. I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about what this is. So every 3 years or so, we get new aerial imagery. In 2015, we actually got new LiDAR, and so we're utilizing the current LiDAR to get georeferenced ortho-rectified photos. So that means they're as accurate as they can be. City staff uses these, county staff uses them, we put them out for the public on RapidMap, consultants utilize them, so it's a really great thing. This is actually funded 81.95% by the planning funds, so it really only gets a little bit of the city budget, so it's a great deal that we do every 3 years or so. So I didn't know if anyone has any questions, otherwise we're just asking for authorization.
Mr. Evans.
Not about this, I just want to make a general comment about the information retrieval on the last topic, so we'll do that later.
Okay. Anything else? Ms. Brennan, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 17, Mr. Harrington.
Good afternoon. Item 17 is to authorize a request for proposals for the Campbell Street Structure Multimodal Routing Study. If you're not aware, the Campbell Street Structure is the bridge on Campbell Street that goes up and over St. Joseph Street and the Rapid City Pier and Eastern Railroad. It's an interesting situation because the bridge itself is owned by the Department of Transportation, yet all the surrounding streets are owned by the City of Rapid City. That came out of the road swap agreement, and part of the reason DOT kept the bridge, as Mr. Tech will tell you, bridges are very expensive to build, maintain, and inspect, so part of the deal was DOT got to keep the bridge, and therefore they are responsible for reconstructing it. They currently have it in their program to be reconstructed in 2027, and so the reason for this study is if you've been out there, there are no bike or pedestrian improvements on either side of that bridge or connecting to that bridge in any way, and there's no way to get up and over that bridge unless you're in a motor vehicle. So as part of the reconstruction, we want to make sure that all modes of transportation are considered through the study area, which would include St. Joseph Street, St. Patrick Street, and Campbell Street Bridge. So this study, in preparation for the design of that bridge, will then allow us to take a look at that area and figure out what the best routing options are for all types of travel. Can we change the ramp structure somehow for the cars, for the bikes, for the peds, just to make sure everybody can get through that area efficiently and safely and at a reasonable design. So again, this is just a request for the proposal for the study. The study is anticipated to be completed this year, and then which point will be passed on to the DOT for their design of the structure itself.
Thank you. Mr. Evans.
Now this I do have a question about. Thank you. I know that one of the biggest bottlenecks in this city is the railroad crossing on St. Patrick, and I've seen cars backed up all the way beyond 5th Street at times. It's that bad. Is there a way, now I don't know what the scope of this project is, but is there a way that those two problems could be combined to find a solution that maybe solves that problem along with this? And I don't know if that's an option, but the entire area maybe is more of a problem than just replacing the bridge. And since they literally are a block apart, I'm wondering if there could be a group solution thought up using, state assets. Thank you.
Since this is a project with the State Department of Transportation and that is outside their jurisdiction, I don't think they would be on board with us combining that in. That is something we can look at doing as an individual type project, but that's not part of the scope of this study.
Could we maybe ask, because it is an issue, and a major issue, could we ask that perhaps we could cooperate with them, and we could find a solution, even if we pay for part of it and they pay for part of it, that maybe solves both the problems, rather than just letting this be built?
We can talk to them about it. This far along in the project, I'm not sure we'd get anywhere, but since, again, that portion of it is outside of the state jurisdiction, I don't think they'd be very receptive to participating in it.
I just hope we could ask, and perhaps we can go about solving two problems then.
We will have some discussions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Is this at our cost, the city's cost, to do this study?
So this is paid for by Metropolitan Planning Organization planning funds, which, like Kelly discussed on the orthophotography, 81.95% of those funds are federal planning funds, and then 18.05% is local city match, which is already budgeted in our long-range planning, transportation planning budget.
Okay, and then when it's time to do the project, will it be a shared cost as well?
That is the state will be picking up the tab for building the structure itself.
The state would pay all of it?
Yes, it's a state facility.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Great, thank you. Mr. Weifenbach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're doing the study, right, and it's partly paid, or mainly paid by the Fed, so
Correct.
is there a possibility to somehow involve Mr. Evans' request in that study somehow, just to see?
We will have a talk with DOT and see if that's something they want to add to the scope of the study, but since this is really their project and they just asked us.
Right.
for
Yeah, we
assistance
definitely
on
wouldn't
that.
want to delay the project, but even if the city paid for the part that would address maybe looking for solutions, obviously, we understand a lot of the, because it's the railroad, because it's the state, because it's a city, we understand a lot of those roadblocks, but maybe if we had a plan that we could propose, and maybe if it wasn't too crazy to add this in, or it didn't cause another heartache and slow this plan down, that we could, since we're there, look at it and see if we can come up with a real solution that we could present, because we've had no real solutions. The only thing we can do is complain, and to the railroad or whoever's involved with, because that intersection right there has always been, since I've lived here, has always been a huge problem, but I don't think we've ever looked at it and said, is there a real solution? We just say, well, the railroad owns it, we can't do nothing about it. Well, if we came to them with a real solution and we're willing to participate, maybe we could do something. I don't know if that's a possibility, Kip, if you could maybe look into it or whatever.
We'll
as
have
you're looking.
discussions with our Department of Transportation representatives and see if anything will come out of that.
Okay. Anything else on this item? Okay, thank you, Mr. Harrington.
Thank you.
We have two more items left under Mayor Council items, 18 and 19. They look like they're just standard reappointments. Director Beegler, do you have anything to comment on number 18? Okay. My colleagues, any issues on 18, 19? If not, let's adjourn. Just remember.
No, I'd like to go back and mention that one thing.
Go ahead,
About
please.
that. If you get on the city website, we talked about information for people that need it. And if we get on our website and you go down a couple, you go to how to, and you go to water or trash bill, and you read, they've got a little subscript under there. We understand it's a problem paying, COVID outbreak and everything. No, it's in there. You can find that program if you dig deeply enough. But the whole website for rapidcity.usa is perhaps, it's not very good. And in times when you've got critical issues, I don't know why we don't have a screen that's appearing here. We don't have changes that take place. Assistance, you need help paying a bill, click there. Not digging 6 things deep. I mean, this is so easy to fix. You could do it in 10 minutes if you're a web page designer. So I think we need to look at these things rather than just keep letting it go on. That's the only comment I wanted to make. So people actually can find it. A lot of people are, they didn't program an IBM 370 in 1973 like I did. I can find it. Most people didn't do that. They need to just have it there so they can find the thing. So let's help them find it.
We can work with our communications director and our IT, and because
Thank
not
you.
everybody's very computer savvy. Anything else, Mr. Evans? Okay, Mr. Weifenbach, back to you.
I just Madam Chair, exactly what you said, can we add that to a working session? Otherwise, it's not going to get done. So if we have the direction from the council to get it done, then we can make sure to get done. What Mr. Evans
Start it with
points
an
out
email.
is
Let's
very
start it.
valuable.
Go that
Well,
way.
We can add it to like one of our next working sessions, or, okay.
Sounds great.
So Mr. Evans, or you, or I, or can add that, so.
I am available 24/7.
There's nothing else we need to talk about. Let's adjourn. Let's remember that we have a federal holiday on Monday, so our next city council meeting will be on Tuesday in these chambers at 6:30. Thank you.